we have a new coaching staff, and this is their first year that they did a coaches clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to start to kind of get your thoughts on what you saw, and maybe a way to do that, Coach, would be tweets of the week. I'm going to start with this. Ed Foley back in December went across the state, and I tweeted at you, and this is actually January 23rd. I tweeted at you that hey, he's coming out your way. You should have him stop by York, and you responded like a few minutes later. And you're like, yeah, he already did a couple weeks ago. So this coaching staff is definitely put in the time. They put in the effort. They went to over 100 schools. What was it like having Coach Foley coming into your office? How did he set that up? And how have the relationships started to be built?
Yeah, it was I just got a call from somebody in the office up there and said that he was coming down. And I was kind of excited to get to know somebody on the staff because, I didn't know anybody on that staff. I kind of knew Coach Rhule a little bit, I guess, from the year before, but other than that, I didn't know anybody. So I was excited to get him in there and just kind of get a feel for what they were going to be like and what he was going to be like. And we had a great conversation. I don't think he necessarily, went to every place because every school he went to had a Division I or a Big Ten caliber player. I think they were trying to get out and make relationships and kind of just get their name out there. So we had a great conversation. We hung out for probably, 45 minutes, I suppose. And, talked about our team, talked about our kids in the area. And he just wanted to get to know about all the schools, what's York High School all about? What are some of the traditions? I think he kind of knew that I had a son that played and some other of the York kids that were on the team. So, it was, he just wanted to talk. And I just think they really, those guys aren't from Nebraska. And, other than what you see on SportsCenter, they probably didn't know a ton about what Nebraska was all about. And I just think they were trying to just get a feel for the state pretty much. And obviously, I think every staff, I've been around since Solich. Every new staff does this. Every one of them. I mean, Bill Callahan's staff did it. Pelini's staff did it. Riley's staff did it. Frost's staff did it. I don't know if any of them did it quite to the extent that Coach Foley did. I remember when Frost's staff came in, they sent all the coaches out all over the state. So I think it's kind of a typical thing that a lot of staffs do at the beginning, just to kind of, like I said, get their names out there and start to develop relationships, and that's going to be hard for any staff to do for 2 and 3 and 4 years, because you just can't expend all that time and energy and manpower year after year. But, Coach Foley, boy, he definitely put the miles on. And he's the perfect guy to do it because he's just really relatable and such an easygoing, just blue collar guy that's easy to talk to. And it was a really good experience.
And that's cool. And one thing, anyone, if you watch the fan forum that you and I did last summer, Coach, we're not here. The last thing we're going to do is sit here and crap on the previous staff. No. That's not what this is about. We're not built that way. And I know you're not. So it's never a comparison. How did these guys do it versus the last one? I think it's interesting to hear your perspective because you've been around doing what you've been doing as a championship coach at both York and Overton. So over the course of 2 decades, you've been doing this through multiple coaching staffs. So I think it's to get that comparison of, and I also think it's good to hear that, sometimes I think the Kool-Aid starts flowing right now where everything's great. And it's like, oh my God, this is the first staff to ever do this. And I like what they're doing. I think it's great what they're doing, but it's also not necessarily unique.
I appreciate you saying that too, because I thought the same thing. I'm like, because I remember there was a big push when Frost first got here that they went throughout the state, and rightfully so on both sides. But it just, it is kind of recency bias all the time with like, well, look at how this staff is recruiting the state. But moving on from that, they have reached out to you. They have made contact with you. You do have a son on the team, so that kind of puts you in a unique perspective. But before I go any further, we talked about our swag earlier. That shirt of yours, I see the 41. It looks like it's a highway. My wife, I know your son's 41, but is this a special branding thing? Because that is an awesome shirt.
My wife's where she grew up, the home she grew up in down by Adams. She grew up on Highway 41. She drove Highway 41 to school, and then some parent friends of ours had a shirt similar to this to their son, and my wife saw it and thought, "Wow, Garrett's number 41." Shirt. I grew up on. So I bought this shirt. I had it made, and we put it on social media. Yeah, I wasn't trying to sell anything.
No.
Yeah, no, but I bet you had 100 different people call me and want to buy one. So
100. I've
yeah,
already kind of thought
a
about
lot
it.
of people, just from a social media tweet, maybe a Facebook or something. So yeah, it's
That's
probably
awesome.
my favorite shirt. So
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get sidetracked. Go ahead.
No. Well, and when Foley went across the state there in January, we're from Columbus, and when he sent his photos out that day, when he social media'd out, he went to Scotus, he went to Lakeview, he went to Columbus High, he went to Schuyler. I mean, you got to be smart about it with what you're doing. But I love how this staff has really made a point of, like, we're not going out to see one place and then coming back. I mean, we're going to go out there and we're gonna make those relationships. And I'm sure when he was out there seeing you, and it was York, Central City, probably Seward, just whatever. There's a whole slew of them right around there, and he hit 8-man schools. They hit 11-man. I mean, they hit a little bit of everything. So at the same token that we said that it's not necessarily unique what they did, it no lessens the fact that it's important what they're doing, and I'm glad to see that they've kind of set those roots up early.
Yeah, and as I said, I've seen every staff do it, but I will say I think Coach Foley went above and beyond. I mean, he was like a week or more, or whatever it was, and he wasn't just cruising up and down the interstate and stopping by the easy places. I mean, he was getting off the beaten path and going to a lot of different schools. So I will say that they've all done it, but I will say I think these guys did maybe more. Coach Foley at least did more than most.
And we had that the promo at the beginning for the Sam Foltz kicking camp. But that was one of the stories of Foley being out in Greeley area and going to see Foltz parents. And just that takes, on top of having, I think, a really savvy staff, and Coach Rhule is very good at what he does. I think there's the influence of Trev, and somebody in the program has to have that kind of knowledge to be able to embark that on those guys, where it's like, oh yeah, there's somebody really important. You should go out there and see them. And I think that's just great. And there were some coaches along the way too. Again, this is not the same thing about previous staffs, but there were some coaches that said, hey, this is the first time we've had a Husker staff come here in a while. So that is cool that they definitely went out of their way to see as many places as they could.
And that kind of speaks to that alignment they always talk about. I mean, it's probably incumbent upon Trev to make sure that these messages get to these coaching staff, but the coaching staff still has to embrace the idea of going out there and doing it. And like to what you said with Coach Foley, going above and beyond, not just embracing it, but taking it to the next level and really ingratiating himself, which is so important to this state. Everybody talks about how Nebraska is different, but it truly is. Where the university is the only game in town. So you like the coaching from these schools throughout the state are so important. Those connections are so important. So I'm glad to hear that they're taking it seriously, I guess is probably the best way to look at it. It's like they're just taking it seriously. We'll see if it maintains, right? Momentum's everything. Yeah. Winning cures all too. So it's like, I'll take one at consistency and the reaching out or winning. I actually kind of like winning at first, but we'll see.
Another cool thing he did is, he's taken the special teams role incredibly seriously. Yeah. And, you mentioned he went and visited the Foltz family, Gerald Foltz, and he mentioned trying to reach out to the Mahers and the Henrys and the different special teams legends that we have right here in Nebraska, trying to get the feeling of, the feel of what kinds of things they did to be great special kickers and punters over the years. So he specifically reached out to a lot of those special teams families too. And I thought that was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Today they had Coach Foley and Buschini, the punter. They had some of the special teams people talking during the
he's high on Buschini the way he was talking about him.
Yeah. And to speak of,
he put on a clinic, speaking of clinics.
Well, and one of the recruits that we got this year, Albano, the kicker from Omaha West Side, there's an in-state kid that they got a scholarship to him as a kicker, and he's going to be competing for that spot right away. Well, we started talking about how the coaches went out to see all of you. And I think this was important. I think it was important that they made those trips in December and January. But what was great about this last weekend in the coaches clinic is it's the reverse. It's the opportunity for all of you coaches out in the schools all across the state and beyond to make that trip to Lincoln and to see the staff. And so it was great to see all the social media photos I was seeing, people posting them coming back here. To get it started off, I guess just from a traditional standpoint, usually the head coach comes out, kind of does the introduction, and then there's a bunch of different sessions where assistant coaches will go and lead them. So Assuming nothing changed drastic with that from a previous one that we would have gone to, how was how did it flow? How did the intro with Coach Rhule, and how did you get the introductions to start meeting with some of the assistants?
What we're trying to find out is were there pork chops?
Yeah. It was a little bit different. It was in the West Stadium on the third and fourth floor up there, and it's never been there before. Part of it, Coach Osborne and the meal was out in the Hawks, but the bulk of the clinic was actually up in the stadium, and that was kind of cool. It just jumped right into the assistant coaches speak, and so we got off the elevator and we sat down, and Coach Rhule started talking about inside zone and just how they different blocking techniques that they use, run block and pass block. And then they just had every session, they had an offensive and a defensive coach, just a Nebraska coach, assistant coach talking about a certain topic. So, I think there was 5 different sessions, 5 different 50-minute sessions that you could hit. So, I listened to half of the staff speak, and I tried to kind of switch it up between offense and defense so I can get as good of a mixture of all of them as I possibly could. Coach Rhule didn't do a whole lot. He basically introduced Coach Osborne, and that's when I had to leave. So I didn't catch all of Coach Osborne's speech. But, Coach Rhule didn't actually give a big, long presentation. It was mostly the assistant coaches that did the heavy work. And then Saturday morning, there was a little FCA session, and then the weightlifting, Coach Campbell and the weightlifting strength and conditioning coaches did a little session, and then it was right into practice from there. So it was. I actually really liked it because when I go to these things, I like getting the nuts and the bolts. How do you teach your running backs to hold the ball? What are your mechanics of block, and what are your the wide receiver coach.
McGuire,
wide receiver coach, Coach McGuire. Is that right? McGuire.
Yep.
He spoke about RPOs. I was blown out of the water. I was blown away by him. He was very impressive, and and everybody talks about him being 23 years old. Well, you wouldn't have been able to tell if he was 23 or 43. He was very well spoken.
How does he? That's really a great. I'd be interested because he's in that coaching element. He is no matter how you slice it, he's a young man. How did he handle himself? It was pretty genuine the way he's with a bunch of grown men, I'm sure.
Well, I was he couldn't have given too many clinic presentations, I wouldn't think, going up to that. And there was probably 200 plus guys in the room, old veteran coaches, and he's a young guy. And I was, like I said, I was really impressed. He was I was as impressed by him as I was anybody the whole day, to be quite honest with you. And that's not putting down anybody else. He did a very, very good job and handled himself well. Like I said, you would never believe he was 23 years old by listening to his session. And it was some pretty technically high level stuff. And obviously you're not going to be the wide receiver coach at the University of Nebraska unless you're really good at what you do and those technical things. But yeah, he was real good. I was very impressed by him.
Now, throughout the years, do you kind of follow a similar pattern and the coaches that you tend to watch? Do you usually catch the O-line coach, or do you try to vary it?
Oh, I'm a quarterback coach and a linebacker coach. I'm the offensive coordinator. I love linebackers. That's just one of my favorites. I love coaching the linebackers. So I always go to the linebacker sessions. I listened to Coach Rhule for 5 straight years, and then this year listening to Coach Dvorak was very good. And it's interesting because Coach Dvorak's a fair amount different than Coach Rhule is. There's new techniques and things are just different than what Coach Rhule did. But, that's coaching. There's multiple different ways to skin a cat, and none of them are necessarily right or wrong, just a lot of different ways to do it. So, and then I like to talk. I obviously like to listen to the quarterback coaches too. I like to get, my goal every clinic season is to pick up at least one, if not play one series of plays that I want to try and implement. And so I always want to kind of hit those offensive sessions. And that's why that wide receiver session, Coach McGuire was so good with the RPOs. I got some real good stuff from him there. So, and like I said, I'm more into the nuts and bolts. I am huge. And, without going into too much, I'm really big. The culture is big with me. Leadership is big with me. And all those things are super important. I get a lot of that stuff from books and videos and all that. When I go to the University of Nebraska, like I said, I want to know, how does Coach Rhule teach the inside zone? What are the steps and the footwork Coach Dvorak's, using? What are the mechanics of the quarterback, how they're throwing the ball? So those are the things I tend to hit. And I was really looking forward to Coach Osborne, but I had a family thing in the evening and I had to take off and go. So I did miss that. And that's one thing. I talked to Coach Rhule and Coach Foley the next morning at practice, and they said they were going to send me a video of it. So I'm hoping to get that at some point so I can at least watch it. So
yeah.
Did
you get a chance to see Raiola last year versus in this year?
Yeah, I think so. I think last year I watched him on the field doing some coaching. They did. He kind of had his offensive line together out in the field house, and he was doing some technique work there with them, and that's kind of where I got to watch him. His stuff is very similar. Obviously, the play is different, but he's not going to change the techniques he teaches too much, I wouldn't think. I don't think the things he talked about Saturday, or I'm sorry, Friday, were not different than we talked about. About a year ago.
That's kind of what I was wondering, actually. It was because, and I don't know if that was like a bit of a conflict with Whipple or not, but I mean, that's obviously why this current staff retained him, is because of the style or whatever school that he subscribes to in terms of blocking. But the other thing is, a lot of the drills that, they show these little tidbits of sights and sounds of practice, you can see. And the lineman drills, to me, and this is just a very brief view of it, but it just seems like I see us moving more with our offensive linemen. It's a lot more running blocks and getting into them, and they're going 10, 15 yards versus just, kind of footwork shuffling. And that just looks a little bit different to my eye. But that's such a snidbit. But I wonder, I was just wondering if there was any difference that you might have saw in terms of practice and how the offensive line was maybe doing drills. I know you probably, you guys did get to see scrimmage, so.
I think they're trying to slim him down
it looks like it,
a little bit. Yeah, I mean,
more flexibility
they want
too, right?
Be able to move, like just what you just said. They want him to be able to get in the open field and get to that second level and block those linebackers and maybe a little more effectively. And so, they, like Bryce Benhart, he's one of the largest humans I've ever been around in my life, but he just looked slender compared to previous years, and I think that's a kind of a concerted effort they're trying to do to, 305, 310, that's plenty. They don't need to be 340, 350. So they want them to be able to move.
Well, and if they can't bend, it's no good anyway.
Yeah.
And that was kind of one of the things of my critiques of maybe the previous regime, in terms of, like, I just didn't feel like our offensive linemen improved physically that much. We got bigger and stronger, but it just seemed like our mobility went down. And I do think, just from the little bits that I've seen, it looks like our O-line's moving a little better, and they all look a little trimmer to me. Yeah. But it's like whatever the flavor of the month is, Some staff will come in and go, "We're too small, we got to get bigger." And I'd be like, "Yeah," and the next staff comes in, "We got to get smaller and faster." I'm like, "Yeah, we just win."
And I'm not going to dog on Coach Duvall and the strength staff or anything, because I think Duvall did a very good job. Because when Duvall took over, I remember sitting in some of those pre-games when Garrett was a recruit, and our guys would be on the field, and then Wisconsin or Iowa would run out, and I'd be like, "Oh my goodness, we're in big trouble," because they were so much bigger. So Duvall had to get us bigger and stronger. Now, I think this new staff is, and you said this word multiple times, I think mobility is a big focal point with this new staff, just being able to move. I remember a couple years ago, Coach Saban at Alabama mentioned, our strength and conditioning is all about speed. It is obviously they want big, strong guys, but their strength and conditioning is all about fast, explosive guys that can move. And I kind of get the feeling with these guys, it's kind of very similar to that. Okay. Yeah, we want them to get bigger and stronger for sure. So they're lifting hard, but the mobility portion of it is, I think, stressed a lot more.
Maybe that's what it is.
Injury prevention, fewer soft tissue injuries, those types of things. So again, not necessarily that the previous strength staff was wrong, but they're just doing it a little bit differently, and they want them to be able to move a little bit better and be a little bit more mobile.
Yeah, a little different philosophy. I know they said with the O linemen that they even took the knee braces off them in practice, that they're not, they weren't using those. But, back in December, I went over to Alumni Hall, downtown Lincoln, one of our sponsors, and they were doing a pipeline jerky event. And we had some members of last year's pipeline there. and one of them was Kevin Williams. And it was right before Kevin left, but I was talking with him, and Benhart was there too. And Benhart, big dude, like just like you said, probably the biggest guy, one of the biggest humans I've ever seen. But Kevin Williams said he's like, he wasn't going to knock anything with Duvall. He's like, Duvall did his job. He got us big. We were strong. We could move a house. He goes, just within the first couple of weeks of being with the new staff at that time, he was like, there's just a different emphasis on mobility, and we'll see what happens with it. And I've talked with other people on this show since then. I think it was Cody Glen I had on, and I was talking with him about the transition between Callahan and Pelini, and two different strength coaches, and they just, they do something a little different. Dave Kennedy did things a little different than what James Dobson did. Not that one's right or wrong. It's just we're going to go in a different path. And I can tell you, seeing the photos of Benhart right now and seeing the video of him today versus what I saw in person there in December, he does look different. So it is interesting. I'm looking forward to see how that can affect the line, maybe having a little more of that mobility. But
two quick things. Mm-hmm. First of all, someone explained it to me as Coach Duvall's staff wanted you to move 500 pounds this far, and Coach Campbell wants you to move 400 pounds this far. So maybe not quite as much weight, but a little bit more range of motion. Like I said, the mobility part of it's huge. And the second quick story is Bryce Benhart was Garrett's roommate right when they moved into the dorm room, and we didn't know who Bryce. We kind of knew just from the recruiting videos and all those things. But he walked into the dorm, and I looked up like this, and I'm like, "Holy cow! Hello, Mr. Benhart." And when he left, and I go, "Garrett, I just have one bit of advice for you, and that is take the top bunk and not the bottom bunk."
For sure,
that's a large man.
Yeah,
that is a large man.
That is great advice.
That would be the end of you.
And it's crazy that they're the biggest boys I've ever been around. I don't get intimidated very often, but when I'm standing by those two dudes, they're big.
Hey man, that's just the thing though with this team. We've got some monsters on this team, and I'm not convinced that some of these guys can't get a hell of a lot better with just a little bit more guided coaching. And just and again, we're not trashing on the other staff, but it just seems like the focus is a little bit clearer with the staff, and I think a lot of guys can benefit from that. So it would be nice to see, because a lot of these guys have grinded, and you've never heard anything bad about most of these players. They all work hard. That's what you hear about. You've heard about that from jump. Great attitudes, great kids, work hard. It would be nice for them.
Coach, you get to hit this from a couple different angles. You are a in-state coach. You do it from a recruiting standpoint. You've talked with these coaches as a coach. You're also a parent of a player on the team. What is it like right now as a parent? How have listening to your son talk, listening to your son's friends talk, how has that transition been? We haven't seen this mass exodus of players, at least up to this point. In fact, we have 105 or whatever the number of scholarships. We actually have to still get that number down. But I think that's a positive on how this staff is certainly treating players, that you haven't just seen people. We've seen a coach a state to the west of us come in and say, hey, get the hell out of here. This staff is certainly working with these players and wants to see them succeed. And if they can't succeed here, then they want to see them succeed somewhere else.
Well, it's, these kids have really been through the ringer for 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, all those close games and those gut punches at the end. And, it's been 4 years of it, and last year was rough, and when Coach Rhule came in, that was basically these guys' third coaching staff they've had in 6 months, and so there was definitely, I think, a little bit of a feeling that this guy's got to earn our respect, because we've been through a lot, and they loved Mickey Joseph, and that obviously didn't go right at the end, and so there was this coach had to earn their respect, and I really feel like Coach Rhule did that fast. I think he's such a relationship guy. I mean, he wants to get to know every kid on that team. And it doesn't matter if you're the starting quarterback or a walk-on, who's never going to play. I think he takes as much time as he can with all of them. And what I've heard from the kids is they feel like these guys are going out of their way to get to know them, to build relationships. And I think it's been pretty incredible how fast they've been able to do that and how fast the kids feel comfortable with them. I've been to a couple practices now, and my wife came to practice on Friday with me, and Garrett was over there doing some drill, and one of the office ladies saw that we were there, and they said, "Oh, you guys got to come over here and talk to Coach Rhule." So another person went all the way across the field, grabbed Garrett, and pulled him out. And Garrett's like, "What are we doing here?" And pulled Garrett all the way across because they wanted Garrett to be there with me and Allison and I when we talked to Coach Rhule. And, he talked about how important family is and how he wanted – and, in Garrett's mind, he's thinking, all right, Dad, shut up. I got to get back to this drill work.
Right,
that time with family and him getting to know Allison and I and Garrett, Dalton was not there. He was over at UNK to practice. But getting to know us as a family, it was important to him. And he talked to us. And then Garrett went back to his drill. But he talked to Allison and I for probably close to 10 minutes, I bet. And that was in the middle of a practice. And it was just because he knew, and I had met him before, but he had never met my wife. And so that was just how important it was. And he talked a lot about how important family was and how we're welcome at practice and the coaches are welcome at practice anytime. And, they want families to come on Saturdays if they possibly can. But, I was told that I could come to practices as a coach. So I was very, very impressed. Coach Foley came over and talked with us. And then all the coaches during practice took the time to stop and say hi to us and get to know us. So they're not only trying to get to know the kids better, they're trying to get to know the families better. And they've already Coach Dvorak had only been there for like 2 days. And they had a meet and greet, which we've never done that before. They just got us all together up on the third floor of the East Stadium, and they brought in food, and it was just all the coaches and all the recruiting people and as many parents that can make it, just walking around and talking, just getting to know and building relationships.
Okay.
And then they had another family meal, which I wasn't able to get to last week, where the kids were encouraged, bring your girlfriend, bring your aunt, uncle, mom, dad, whatever. And they wanted them to bring family in. So they're really making it an emphasis. Another cool thing they're doing is they're having a mom's night the day before the spring game. And my wife is fired up because one of the things on the itinerary is tackle your son. And so he's been having me teach her all these techniques of how she can take him out. And so it's just in this short amount of time. And, who knows if it'll keep going this way. But they're not just saying it. They're really doing it. They're making a serious effort to really get to know the kids. It's easy for them to get to know the kids, but it's hard to get to know the parents. And they're really trying hard. So we appreciate that. And, it makes us feel even more comfortable with who's taking care of our boy.
That's just music to my ears, honestly, everything that you just said, because that's how I kind of envisioned Nebraska should be, especially with the local families, and really it's just nice to hear what they're saying out front in the cameras is what's happening in the back end too. Because lots of times, just as fans, you can read what's on the message boards, you can read what's in the papers, and you can kind of read between the lines on a press conference. Maybe
listen to a dumb podcast,
right? Exactly, but you can't really know how he's actually talking to parents, and you can't actually know how he's actually interacting with the players. And to hear that to me is just like, okay, that's validation of what I'm seeing. The man presents himself in front of the cameras is what's going on in the background, and that means a lot to me. Just as a Nebraskan, as how I want my coach to be. Like I'm like, okay, this is a guy I can get behind. This is a guy I'm excited about. He just the more I hear about it, he just comes across as a guy who kind of has it figured out to an extent. Like the reason he can talk to you during the middle of a practice is because he's a coacher of coaches, and they can run the practice and he can monitor it, a little bit in the background. And what a great,
that's a very Devaney kind of way to run a practice.
But those are the charmers, right? Those are the coaches that people love because they can spend time with you and they can make a connection, and it seems important and it seems genuine from to hear you talk about it. So that's, like I said, that's just music to my ears.
He's very approachable, and you always saw pictures with, people with Frost and Riley and all those, Pelini and all those guys. But Coach Rhule is he just kind of seems like an everyman. I mean, he's just kind of a normal guy out there. And I think people just feel comfortable coming up and talking to him. And then when you actually do talk to him, he acts the same way as he looks. I mean, he's just a nice, normal guy. I mean, cool. He is easy to talk to and very, very approachable. So I just, just a blue collar guy. He's not, there's been a lot of coaches, and whether it's an assistant, not just at Nebraska, I've dealt with so many coaching staffs over the years, but you get a lot of, you know, I'm a D1 coach and you're just a little high school guy, you know, and we're a little bit bigger than you or more important than you.
Right.
You know, I felt like Frost's staff was really good in that regard too, where they were very approachable. But these guys and Coach Rhule in particular, they're very much the same. They put themselves on the same level as you. It's easy for those guys to kind of, if they wanted to, you know, to kind of big time you a little bit.
Sure.
They're not doing that one bit. And, you know, obviously, you know, I'm a head coach at a high school in Nebraska that sent them some kids. So, you know, they want to make a good relationship with me, but I don't feel like they treat me any different than anybody. I mean, they're super nice to all of them. So it's definitely a breath of fresh air for sure.
Oh, that's great.
You know, I think of actually a statement that Callahan made back in the day. He goes, "They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." And
I've heard a lot of people say that.
Yeah. But it still means something too. I mean, like we've talked about this.
Yeah, I'm not about. Yeah,
we've talked about this on this show, you and me, Mac, about that. There are times that we've lost a lot of the close games the last few years, and we'd hear it was little things, and we broke that down one time. Like, what is a little thing versus a basic or a fundamental of football? And to me, a little thing isn't special teams or isn't a mistake that we made on the field, penalties, turnovers. A little thing are the things that you just talked about. Hey, bring the family over here. No one sees that. Nobody, and nobody knows that happens. Unless we talk about it on a podcast. But it's important, right? It's a little thing, but it adds up. And I'm hearing all these little anecdotal stories, one after another. The story in Bellevue West about the wife works at Bellevue East and made cookies, and when he went over to Bellevue East, he thanked her, in class, for the cookies she made. And it's those are little things, but they do add up, and it's that relationship building, and they don't care how much you know until you know how much they care, and it seems like he cares enough to want to do that and build those relationships. So I think that's great.
Yeah, he talks about earning the right to coach him hard, and I think that's kind of goes along the same lines. It's just
all that's a part of building a culture. All those, and there are no little things. They're all big things. All those, like you said, all those little things add up. But they're all a part of building a culture, which he's obviously trying to build a family culture. And, I always remember Coach Osborne talking about unity is the most important thing in any team, and if you really talk about family, you're talking about the kids, you're talking about everybody involved in the program, the family and the kids. And so, I would agree 100% that all those little things definitely add up. You put all those things together, and then maybe the kids will fight just a little harder, and maybe they'll find a way to get that extra first down, or maybe whatever. But I also think that it's not just those, I don't want to call them selfish reasons, but I also think he just does it because he cares about the kids. Yeah. I've only known Coach Rhule for a couple months. I'm just kind of thinking, though, I'm assuming just kind of what I've got to know about him so far. It's just, I think he just genuinely cares about the kids. And, I think his dad was a pastor. I heard somewhere along the line, and he just seems like a genuinely caring guy who just wants the best for all the boys that go down there and play for him.
It's been interesting to me a little bit how quickly T.O. has jumped on board with Matt Rhule too. Mm-hmm. I know Trev has a lot to do with that, but I don't know if you got a chance to see that round table with him and Trev.
Part of it.
It's really good. And, and T.O. you can clearly tell isn't just sitting there to look good. He's talking, he's engaging, I know you didn't get to see him talk at the coaches clinic, but it sounded like it was really good. It sounded like he was really engaged and kind of fired up and giving good knowledge. So, I mean, that stamp of approval from Tom kind of goes a long way for me. And it's just kind of interesting because obviously he loved Frost. I mean, Frost was one of his guys, but for him to so quickly embrace the next guy, I think is important.
Well, and talking to Coach Rhule and Coach Foley at practice on Saturday morning, it was really cool to see the kind of the reverence that they had when they talked about Coach Osborne, and just how they were almost starstruck a little bit when they got to talk to him for the first time and got to meet him. I'm 100% that way still. I've met him several times, but it's still, holy cow, that's Tom Osborne. I remember the first time ever Garrett was a recruit as a sophomore in high school. And I'd been coaching for a while at that point, but we went there and somebody introduced Garrett to Coach Osborne, and I'm sitting in the background like, oh, geez, He had to shake his hand, I'm like sweating. And he came over and he goes, "Hi, Coach Snodgrass, how you doing?" I'm like, "Oh my God, Tom Osborne knows my name." It was a really big deal to me, and I thought it was pretty cool. And then Garrett, about a month ago, they were doing their spring thing where they had to take a picture with some Hall of Famers, and Garrett and most of the guys just took pictures in front of the Hall of Fame pictures. Well, Garrett got a selfie with actually Tom Osborne and Trev Albert. So he got
nice.
two Hall of Famers at once.
Yeah, I remember
Garrett
seeing that.
called me and he goes, we were talking for a while and he goes, "Oh, Dad, Coach Osborne told me to tell you hi." I'm like, "Oh, wow." I mean, it just still is like, that's cool. He's kind of my hero. I mean, he is. I mean, ever since I was a little kid, I mean, Tom Osborne was a big thing. I've read every book he's ever written. And a major, major part of my coaching philosophy comes from those books and just what Tom Osborne did as a coach. I mean, how would you not want to be like that guy?
That's amazing.
I mean, he's incredible. And the fact that he's still, able to come out and wow a group of 400 coaches today is pretty awesome.
That's really cool.
I love it. I love it. I love hearing it. I love seeing him out there. I love seeing him engaged with the program still at his age.
Mm-hmm.
It's all good. The kids call it a vibe these days, like when something's going good. But the vibe right now down in Lincoln is good.